Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. So the next 12 or so hours, depending on when this video is uploaded, is absolutely critical for the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition. This could actually be the make it or break it night for the buyout, so the entire gaming world right now is waiting to hear from the Ninth Circuit, which will make their decision on whether or not to grant the FTC an extended temporary restraining order. Now, I talked a lot about this in yesterday's video and what all this means, so do make sure to check that video out if you missed it. But for today, I'll briefly touch upon the latest information between the FTC and Microsoft, but just considering the timing and how quickly things are moving right now, this story, in all honesty, could completely change within hours of this video. So what I'm going to do here is I'll briefly touch up on the FTC situation, and then I'll move in over to the CMA stuff, which that's a little bit more long-term. There are a lot of questions with the latest developments with the CMA and Microsoft. Then a little bit later on in the video, we'll talk about a PlayStation controversy and then also an Xbox Game Pass update. So do make sure to stay tuned for all of that as well. But what you kind of need to know for today, or at least when it comes to the FTC situation, is that if the Ninth Circuit doesn't respond, or if they deny the FTC an extended TRO, then Microsoft is free to close as early as 12:01 a.m. Pacific time on Saturday. If it's granted, however, then this could effectively kill the buyout depending on what Microsoft and Activision wants to do next. Their deadline to complete is set for July 18th, and if they can't complete it by then, they will then need to renegotiate, which there's really no guarantee in that. We don't know how those discussions will shape up. In other words, like I said before, tonight could be the big night in figuring out what will happen with this acquisition. Will it complete or will it not? And Microsoft, well, they did respond today. They sent their filing to the Ninth Circuit and completely dismantled the FTC's argument. They had a brilliant response to the FTC's claims to the Ninth Circuit, and they essentially called them out for all their delay tactics and perfectly summarized why the court is in such a rushed state today. That's simply because, as I have repeatedly said, the FTC has wasted time to attempt to delay the closure past Microsoft and Activision's July 18th deadline. They're doing this simply because they hope this will kill the deal. So let's just go and take a glimpse at Microsoft's response, which says, second, the FTC's claimed emergency is entirely of its own creation. Microsoft and Activision first notified the FTC of the merger on February 1st, 2022. The commission filed an administrative complaint challenging the merger on December 8th, 2022. Breaking from its standard practice in merger cases, the FTC did not file a federal court complaint seeking a preliminary injunction at that time. On the contrary, it set its administrative hearing for August 2nd, 2023, after the merger agreement's termination date, which again is on July 18th. Thus, the FTC acted for the better part of a year and a half as though this case was not an emergency necessitating federal court intervention. The parties and the court faced a time crunch because, and only because, the FTC did not file this action to preliminary enjoin the merger until June 12th, 2023, less than 6 weeks before the termination date. So, I mean, this really sums up the entire mess that we're currently in now. I've been saying it for a while, but the FTC, they have done nothing but delay tactics because that's really their only hope. And Microsoft demonstrated that beautifully to the Ninth Circuit. I mean, I can't imagine the Ninth Circuit is thrilled about how the FTC is trying to rush them with this emergency motion. And again, if the FTC wants to sue Microsoft, they can still do that without a TRO beyond the July 18th deadline. The temporary restraining order is completely illogical, and I'd be surprised if the Ninth Circuit actually falls for such a cheap tactic like this. Would they really effectively kill the deal simply because the FTC filed for this emergency motion with very little logic? I mean, I suppose we'll see what happens tonight. Maybe the FTC does make fools of them, but I just can't imagine that based on Microsoft's response, which laid it out very clear. With that, though, I'm just going to go ahead and move on over to the CMA stuff. This is a little less timely. Things aren't going to change within hours of this video, but there's been 2 developments since we last spoke. The CMA has now issued an extension for a Microsoft Activision investigation to August 29th due to quote-unquote special reasons. Now, the CMA notes that they're aiming to resolve this in advance of this date, though, so don't take that August 29th extension too literally. It really could happen at any moment. One thing I have seen online, though, is that some people are viewing this as an attempt to delay this acquisition, but I don't really view it in that way. I actually believe that this is a good thing. Sure, in an ideal world, they would have approved the deal before the July 18th deadline, but with the new report that Microsoft is now offering to give up some control of their cloud gaming service in the UK, this is not just a remedy, but rather it's a restructure, hence the short investigation. Also, a short and rapid investigation. That rapid part is important. Now, why I say this is a good thing, though, is because it does show you that the CMA is now open for business once again, and they're working rapidly with Microsoft. This is only a 6-week extension, which might be even shorter than that if they can get it done ahead of time. The big question here, though, is how does all this affect the July 18th deadline? That's what everybody wants to know. Well, there's really 2 options here. The first is that with Microsoft and Activision kind of knowing the end is near, Microsoft could hypothetically extend the Activision deal to accommodate. I think Activision would be open to a short 6-week extension, just considering it won't be that long. It's something that I think Microsoft and Activision could easily sell to shareholders. The other option, however, and this is the one that I think might happen, they could close over the UK and work with the CMA in parallel. I think closing now is still for the best, as the 2 can resolve their issues post-closing. Pausing the CAT trial, I think, is a good indication of this. I keep saying it, but Microsoft likely would not have agreed to pause the CAT trial unless there was a good sign the 2 can work something out. More so, though, the reason I feel so strongly that closing over the CMA is a realistic option is simply because what we discussed yesterday. NASDAQ announced that Activision will be replaced on the open market starting July 17th. That is a clear-cut sign of an acquisition being completed imminently, maybe even possibly as early as 12:01 a.m. Saturday. So, I mean, this could happen tonight, or if not, maybe on Monday. But for all the questions on whether or not Microsoft can close over the CMA, I think that if anything else, the NASDAQ replacement is a good sign that that's what they're planning to do. The ramifications, yes, will be interesting to see. But again, if you look at what's happening, it sounds like the CMA and Microsoft have come to some type of understanding. So if both are on the same page, a closing and a new investigation could just happen in parallel. In that situation, UK gamers might not get the same benefits as everybody else immediately unless Microsoft decides to wait. But so long as they can agree shortly after the post-deadline, everybody will then win at the end of the day. The other interesting thing happening here, though, is that the CAT has decided to step in. They announced a July 17th case management conference for the CMA and Microsoft to quote-unquote consider the application made jointly by all parties to adjourn these proceedings pending further discussions between the CMA and Microsoft. Yeah, like I said before, there's a lot happening, but with the CAT intervening here to see what the path forward is, I remain optimistic that Microsoft and the CMA has found a way forward. We should learn more about what's happening between the 2, though, come next week on July 17th with this conference. But there you go. I mean, that was a lot to go over, but right now, all eyes are on what happens tonight. This could be the make it or break it decision for Microsoft. All right, though, let's just kind of go ahead and move on. We do have a couple more things to talk about here because Sony just revealed Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart's PC specs, and this has caught a lot of attention for all the wrong reasons. Now, if you remember right, back in 2020, Sony and Insomniac suggested that Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart wouldn't be possible without the blazingly fast PlayStation 5 NVMe solid-state drive. I mean, really, even at the time, this did not sound correct. They were basically saying the SSD was the only reason they can warp between dimensions without load times. But if you look at something like Psychonauts 2, it does the same thing. But here's the catch. That game was also playable on the Xbox One with a regular old hard drive. So, I mean, this comment by Insomniac just never really made sense. So fans were highly skeptical at the time, and it kind of came off as a lie to sell the PlayStation 5. Well, about that. Here we are years later with the PC release, and let's just kind of see the specs. Was that statement ever true? Well, apparently not, because the specs reveal the minimum requirement does indeed say that you can play Rift Apart with a 75GB hard drive. Now, to be fair, they do still say an SSD is recommended, but, apparently not impossible either, like was previously suggested. In all fairness, though, I mean, I am very curious to see how this game runs on a hard drive compared to an SSD. See if there is, in fact, any big issues with those dimension jumps for a regular hard drive. I mean, I guess we won't have to wait too long, though. I'm sure a lot of people will be doing this because Rift Apart will be available on PC here soon on July 26th. What I will say here, though, despite all of the controversy, this is an excellent game. So if you haven't played it already, and if you do have a capable PC, do check out Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart when it releases again on July 26th. Now, we also got an update for the Xbox Game Pass Family Plan. This is released in various different regions, but still isn't available worldwide. I know there are a lot of people anxiously awaiting a more official worldwide release, and well, it does sound like we are getting closer. Microsoft today announced that they're ending the Family Plan preview on August 15th. In their statement, they stated, on August 15th, 2023, we will be ending the preview as we look to take the learning from the past several months and investigate building an offer which we can launch worldwide. So, yeah, from the sounds of it here, they're gearing up for a worldwide release based on the data that they've gathered from its preview. So it is still difficult to know exactly when it will come out and what the pricing will be. It all just kind of depends on what they've learned. But if you are in a family that has multiple Game Pass subscriptions, this will certainly be something to keep an eye on. Hopefully it is coming soon with them ending the preview here, but it could save families a lot of money depending on the price that they offer. As always, though, I will keep an eye open for this, and as we hear more, of course, I will let you all know as soon as possible. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, are you disappointed that Sony is investing more money into multiplayer games than they are single player? According to the reports, 60% of their investment is currently in multiplayer, and a lot of you do seem concerned about this. 55% of you said yes, only 12% of you said no, while 27% of you are still on the fence, saying that you are indifferent. Now, I can understand those who are indifferent. A lot of this will kind of depend on what the overall quality of these games are and just how consistent Sony will be with their single-player offering as well. But I am with the majority here. So here's the thing for me. I have no issues with multiplayer games. I've said it before, but some of my favorite games of all time are multiplayer-centric. But Sony, to me, is special because of their single-player exclusives. It's pretty obvious that's what their hardcore fan base wants. And this does kind of deviate from that, in my opinion, too fast and too drastically. I personally feel like it would have been better to put more money into single-player, double down on what makes them so special, but also increase their investment in multiplayer as well. They can do both. That's not the problem here. But I feel a 70-30 split or even a 60-40 split, with the majority being single player, would have been better suited for their audience specifically. I think if anything else, though, it will be highly interesting to see if Sony can find the same success with their multiplayer offering in the next 3 to 4 years as they've had with their single player. That will ultimately define if Sony is right or wrong with this decision, but historically, this has not been Sony's strong suit, and live service games, they are tough business to get into. It's highly competitive, as we've talked about time and time again, the mythical cash cow syndrome, as I like to say, but I guess that's one of the reasons they acquired Bungie. Bungie is overseeing their live service titles to make sure they're of high quality. So, I guess we'll see what happens, but yeah, definitely do expect a lot of live service announcements from Sony in the coming years. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.